Hi, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of welln'ish. Today, we have a very special guest, Dr. Jade Lefebvre. She's a psychologist. She's actually a PsyD, a new term that I just learned about today, with an additional background of a master's in counseling psychology, and she's also a yoga teacher. Jade happens to be one of my good friends. I'm very happy to have her here today. She's always my reference for anything psychology and spirituality. So welcome,
That's
Jade.
such a nice compliment. I feel like the same way about you. Our conversations have always been so insightful, and I often reflect on them so much after we have them. So I'm really happy to be here to share a little bit together.
I'm excited to ask you all these questions that are super basic, but that I've never really asked you because I've never felt like I've ever sat down and interviewed you about your career. So
Okay, let's get going.
It should be fun. So what pulled you into the direction of therapy, and why did you decide to reach for the doctoral level?
It's a good question because, in fact, I think I didn't know from the beginning that the end of the road would be psychology for me in terms of actually being a clinical psychologist. When I started my undergrad, I actually thought, okay, what's the best thing to study? I felt like kind of the school system wasn't that meaningful to me. I loved learning, but I felt that we also learned very basic things that weren't necessarily about life. And so I thought, if I study people, I'm actually studying life. And so I decided to go into psychology because it was kind of like the least worst option for me at the time, which is funny. You wouldn't think that because I love my job, but at the time I remember feeling so lost and feeling like nothing was meaningful enough for me in the school system. And once I started studying psychology, it felt really meaningful. It felt like I could understand people around me and life and at a deeper level. And then after I finished my undergrad, the master's kind of felt right as well. And then after my master's, I thought, okay, well, I do want to be a clinical psychologist. I don't feel like I have enough training, and I want to deepen that and become a lot more confident in the type of therapy or the type of work that I can offer to clients and to groups and individuals around, I guess, the university system, since I love working in the universities at the time. So I decided to do my doctoral studies. And interestingly enough, it was only in my second year of my doctorate that I thought, oh my gosh, this is actually what I want to do. And it's because I read an article that compared artists and psychologists, and something just clicked there with me, because artists, they have this creative energy that they know how to apply in the art form. And I always had that creative energy, but never had the means or the physical way of transforming that creative energy into something solid. I loved creative writing and photography, but it didn't feel that wasn't my calling. And so finally I understood,
Yes.
Okay, being a psychologist, I get to witness people create the lives that they want. I get to use my creativity to help reach that person in a different way, or to help them see life in a different way and to connect to their true self. And for me, that felt epic. I still have chills when I talk about it in this and I think about that article. And that's why I understood, okay, this is my calling, is to sit with people and to work with them and to see them grow and change and build that life that they want. And yeah, I don't know. It's a long answer to a short question, but
No, I love that answer. In osteo school, they used to always tell us it's a science and an art, and I didn't fully realize what that meant until we graduated also. And there's just, it's impossible to teach that human connection aspect. And for me, that is always what is the most fulfilling is the thing that you can't put into words, or you're connecting to this person and helping them heal. And then for us, there's also the aspect of art and the techniques on how you apply it, and picking up on how the person's reacting and their energy. And but I totally get what you're saying.
And it's that the thing is, art transcends words, right? And so that's also something that I think words are the way that I work with people, but I think that the artistry and the work that both you and I do is the things that happen in between the words, in the moments that you can't really define, or the way that for you that you touch the person that you're working with, or the way that you attune to them and in the treatment that you give, and adapt to each person differently. Yeah.
So what is your niche? What type of clientele do you typically
So
work
right
with?
now I'm located in a university system. So I work with a lot of students, different levels. So undergraduate, graduate. I worked with medical students as well. But in terms of like what types of problematics do I like to work with, I really love life transitions.
Hmm.
So that's why the university system is so perfect for me in a sense because students show up to school.
Oh, life
Yeah, life
transition. Okay.
transitions. So students show up to university. It's the sometimes the first time they've been on their own, and their whole life is ahead of them, and they're not quite determined, and they're not quite sure where they're going. And so the element of co-creating their lives and taking the next steps is really fun. When I've also developed this
Hmm.
interest in parenting and the transition into becoming mother or becoming father or becoming the parent that you'd like to be. So realizing that interest really is coming from a place of transition because that's when usually we're faced with
Okay.
the most growth. We have to grow. There's no opportunity not to. Like we're faced with change. And how are
Hmm.
we going to move into that change is something that I love working with. And beyond that, anxiety, depression, grief, things, relationships, issues that people kind of face in their day to day life is if you want to work with me, I guess just get ready to grow and look at your life maybe a little bit more closely.
I love that viewpoint of transition, and I couldn't agree more that that's really where the most growth happens. When I think about my life, a lot of the time, I always see it in certain like big emotional triggers. It was like, oh, like that was before this happened, and like I can really see how different I was in like each step. And a lot of the time, it is
Mm-hmm.
school also. Like, oh, was that before prep school or after
Mm-hmm.
prep school, and then university? And you really look at your life in those stages because yeah, you're forced to grow and change and evolve and
Yeah, and
adapt.
especially
So
especially
yeah,
prep
it's
school where
interesting.
you're 15 years old on your own, like kind of trying to figure out life.
Hmm.
For us, we're in a different
Yeah.
country. Wasn't FaceTime
Yeah.
available. It's hard.
Yeah. Actually, at my prep school was the first time also where I just went to a school previously that was just very textbook, like, whereas this school, there was actually a monastery on the grounds. So it had a very big spiritual aspect to it. So I'll never forget, I was in this class. It was called Catholic Doctrine, and we actually had a monk teaching the class. And I think because I was shy, he liked to try to poke at me and get me to
Hmm.
come out of my shell. And one of the days, he just kept going, Miss Grant, Miss Grant. And it's like, for me, answering a question out loud in class was like, I'd
Hmm.
rather die. And one of the questions he asked me was, oh, what is happiness? And I was like, to be successful. And he was, well, what's being successful? And then I was like, to get a good job. And everybody in the class like snickered because I mean, that's how I had always heard about success was basically like get a good job and like, make a certain income. And I don't know, I didn't really think about existential questions until I got to that school. And I'll never forget that day. And somebody raises their hand. They're like, success is being happy. And I was like, oh my God,
But isn't that where we started?
mind blown. Yeah. Mind blown. And like I just remember obsessing those 2 years there in happiness, and like it was the first time where I asked myself all of these big questions, and I really noticed a huge shift in myself, like so many different moods, and I'm grateful for it. But it was also like, would have been great to have someone like you to talk to these
Yeah,
things
especially if you
about.
were someone that was maybe more quiet or reserved. Sometimes we have these things that maybe we're not so ready to share with other people, and then having a space where you can share that
Yes.
and sort of just show up and be yourself and not be worried about what impact it might have on your relationships is
Mm-hmm.
really helpful. But it's funny, like my
Mm-hmm.
prep school, same thing. I had the first year that I was there was like I don't even remember what it's called. It was a wellness type class, and it was led by a spiritual counselor of some sort. And we had to talk
Okay.
about life and in this small group, and it was very revealing for me too to be able to ask those questions in the
Mm-hmm.
form of like school. Yeah, and then
Yes.
thinking about what that means for you and building your life in that way it changes
Yeah,
everything when you start asking about deeper meaning.
for sure. I
Mm.
couldn't agree more. So what kind of tools do you use with your clients? Like one of the only psychological tools that I kind of know about is cognitive
Hmm.
behavioral therapy. So I was just curious, what else is out there? What do you like to use? Is there any kind of tools that somebody could take away from this podcast and try to
Yeah, so
apply?
A lot of
in
times
their
when we
life.
think about looking for a psychologist, we think, okay, what's their approach, and do I resonate with that? And it's a very good way to start. I would say that what it shows, the approach, is sort of what values that your therapist like leans on, or what are their pillars of their approach. However, research actually shows that it's not necessarily the approach that is shows outcome. It's really the relationship you have with the person you're working with, and how much both of you buy into the work. Um, so
Mm.
that's
Okay.
I thought that was really interesting too. Is that it's really how much we believe in the work that we're doing, both of us, or if you're working with the group, or the entire group. And then, so my approach, if you want to know more about it, is I'm like really grounded in humanistic psychology, which believes that, you know, we have an inherent and a desire to grow inside of ourselves, and that there's a goodness in us. And
Mm.
so that really brings a vision in terms of looking at my client from a compassionate space. So I love compassion focused therapy and third wave CBT. So the third wave aspect of it is more, so I'm integrative. I work with all of them together. But the third wave CBT is more
Okay.
looking at values and bringing in mindfulness meditation rather than just working with your thoughts. So in traditional CBT, the idea is that your thoughts and your body work together, and we can change your thoughts to have a better life. Whereas third wave sort of says, I'm changing the relationship to my thoughts, and changing the relationship to my body
Mm.
and my emotions to live a different life. So it's like our
Okay.
thoughts, the idea is our thoughts are always there, but the way we relate to them can change. So it's a bit meta in a sense.
Mm.
Yeah,
I love
yeah, and
that.
it's really cool because I think when we start to understand the way that our body, mind, spirit, emotions, all of those work together, we become much more empowered because we don't allow the biology to make decisions for us. We are attuned to our values, attuned to our experience, and then we have a lot more choice. And we can lead a life that looks more like us than what our fears or our maybe healing parts would want us to live.
Mm. Very
Yeah, I could
interesting.
talk about it for a long time.
I remember, I know, and it'll be a good segue for later talking a little bit about spirituality, but I do remember reading this book once, the Joe Dispenza, it's called, wasn't the placebo? Oh, Becoming Superhuman. And he was saying, like, we're all addicted to our emotion. And I was like, what? And then I was like, he was just talking about patterns. And it's like, you're likely go through the same
Mhm,
emotional thing
mhm,
on a daily basis. And I was like, oh my God, it's so true. It's just like, I definitely have a tendency towards anxiety. And it's like, I wake up in the morning and it's like, my brain's like, look for the anxious thought, look for the anxious thought.
mhm.
Like, where is it? And I don't know, it just really kind of like punched me in the face that day, that it was like, wow, we really do have like like our thoughts and emotion and how it affects our physical. It's just everything is so interrelated, and I just appreciate that there's psychologists out there who work in that three-dimensional or third wave,
Yeah, approach.
I guess you
Well,
could call it.
actually, Paul Gilbert, he's the founder of compassion focused therapy. He looks a lot at evolution to understand our biology and to break shame about that, and to then, like I said, a bit override it. And so he talks often about like we are predisposed towards stress because that's what helped us stay alive for so long in nature. And so, but we're not under stress, like life-threatening stress every day anymore. It's just our body doesn't know the difference. And so if, you know, for
Mm-hmm.
example, you have something that's really stressful for you that's coming up, whether it's a podcast episode or an exam, or maybe you're starting a new job, or you're about to give birth, the body understands that as a threat. And by working with some of these
Mm.
tools, you're able to identify that as a threat and sort of say, is this really a threat? Of course I'm nervous. Of course this is exciting. Sometimes nervous and exciting sort of feels the same way. And then reframe that in a way
Yes.
that you're holding space and okay with that fear, maybe not okay, but knowing that it's there, and inviting compassion or inviting a different mindset to help you through whatever you're faced with
Mm.
in that time. Yeah, and that's the part
Interesting.
of the mind, you
That's
know.
a yes. Wow. So you did your, I was just like, wow,
Yeah,
go
go
in so
for
many
it.
different directions. You did, you did your
Yeah.
thesis on compassion. I guess that's a good segue. So can you dumb down compassion for us, or give us an explanation? Because I think the words empathy, sympathy, and compassion are all kind of thrown around and not everyone necessarily
Yeah.
understands the differences.
And
And
again, I could talk about this
yeah,
for like 2 hours, so I'm gonna really try to go in like 2 sentences here. But I would say sympathy is
okay,
more like you see the person's having a difficult experience or a difficult emotion, and you can recognize that they're having that. Sometimes it can lead to pity, not always, but it's just sort of being like, oh, that person's experiencing something. Whereas empathy is sort of feeling
mm-hmm.
it as if it's your own. So the person, for example, when the person's experiencing loss, you may also tune into your own loss and feel it with them. Or if it's maybe anger, you might feel the same way. So you're kind of taking on that person's experience as your own. And then in compassion, it's
Okay,
noticing that that person's having an experience, having it wash through you. So, in a sense, kind of experiencing it with them, and also sort of remembering that it's theirs and that you can have an impactful action upon them. So, compassion has both the piece of noticing and the piece of experiencing, as well as the action piece. So it kind of brings in all of them, but it puts you in a different space, the space of being attuned and active without taking it on. It's really empowering in a sense
mm,
in that way, in terms of like the definition. And self compassion is then
okay,
allowing yourself to also turn towards yourself as a person experiencing difficulties sometimes, and choosing to both notice, or I guess all three, to notice that you're having a hard time, choose to be kind to yourself in that moment, and remember that it's part of the human experience to struggle, taking away the shame and having that opportunity to be kind to yourself in difficulty. Now, it sounds easy when explained, but it's so hard when we start trying to be kind to ourselves, because for a long time, I don't know about you, but when we talk about research, oftentimes in my field, we say like me search, because it's so tied to ourselves. But I had
yeah,
a really harsh internal dialogue. My inner person was very, very mean. She was very demanding, and um, I had a tendency towards perfectionism and performance, and it felt safe for me to coach myself in a way that was not kind, in a way that was encouraging, I thought, but that wasn't loving. And when I started working with self compassion, I had to start talking to myself in a way that didn't, that was, you know, it's not being um, it's not being nice, it's being kind. And nice is for other people, kind is saying the real thing. So it's not pretending that everything's going to be okay. It's sort of saying, this really sucks, you weren't at your best, how can we do better? This isn't you, this is something that happened to you, this is something that is going on in your life. Who are you as a
mm,
person, and how can we bring that in to overcome this situation? Yeah, does that make sense? I
okay.
don't know if I'm trying to bring it down to the
Oh
basics
yeah,
of what it is.
no, that makes a lot of sense. And um, I remember, like, I would love to have more tools, but I remember reading once it was, talk to yourself the way you would talk
Hmm.
to a loved one or a child, or if you were talking to
Yeah.
yourself as a child. And I always thought that really stuck with me because I'm similar to you, like very hard on myself. And I will often think about it like, okay, if my sister came with me with this problem,
Hmm.
how would I talk to her? And I try to reinforce that, but it's breaking the habits, I guess, that are hard, and which makes you
Yeah.
so important
But
to
like
have in
that
someone's
question, that's
life.
the, again, like we had talked about what's the best tool for self-compassion. Like it really is thinking about yourself as someone you love, which is already so hard for someone to do.
Mm-hmm.
So then asking, okay, what would I say to my sister if she was struggling with this? Or what, sometimes we even think about who
Yeah.
are compassionate people in our lives and what would they say to me um, in this
Mm,
situation, right? So
interesting.
sometimes one of the exercises I run clients with is composing their compassionate counsel, and it can be metaphorical.
Oh, I've heard
Yeah,
of this
like for
too. That's cool.
example, the in Paul Gilbert's work, there's also developing your compassionate self. And like when I did that exercise the first time, my compassionate self looked like my dog with like butterfly wings and like a kind of dragon energy, like a fierceness. So it's a
Oh, that's
creative and
funny.
also expressive exploration of self, And it's also terrifying because when we start letting go of the ways that we have helped ourselves get to this point and think about other ways, then we also have to say goodbye to a part of ourselves that maybe isn't working anymore. That can be, a bit more
Mm-hmm.
effective in a different perspective.
It's interesting that you say that because I was just having this conversation with my sister. She's probably going to be embarrassed that I'm talking about her so much, but we were saying how like our anxiety has really fueled us to be like
Yeah.
high achievers, performers in certain times of our life. And like she works in sales, and like I think in part she's like, if I didn't have this stress of like I need my next sale, it'd be hard. Like it would be like she had a hard time imagining like how do people find the motivation without that like crazy anxiety. And I feel like that in school, like people would come to school like not studying for an exam, and they'd be like, oh, I didn't really study or I haven't started, and I'd be like, I don't understand. Do you not wake up with like this weight on your chest that needs like, how did you
Yeah.
pass school without
Yeah.
having any stress? It makes no sense to me. It's like, especially in osteo school, everyone's like meditating and
Yeah.
calm. And I'm like, I don't understand how you got through school without the stress that
Yeah.
forced you in your seat. And I mean, I'm sure you could talk to this since you counsel medical students who are like the most
Yeah.
type A people.
Yeah. I mean, look, like
Yeah, do you
I
have any
resonate with a
comments on
lot of
that?
what you're saying personally. It's like that stress got me to grad school. And but I guess
Yeah.
like, well, if you're thinking about like more of like a psychological concept, I'll talk about my brother. He does sports psychology and mental performance coaching, and we often talk about like how
So
stress,
cool.
plays into our lives, and just the stress performance curve. You need a little bit of, I guess, activity to get you to your best level of performance, but too much and you're not performing well, and not
Hmm.
enough and you're not performing well. So it's not saying, yeah, it's not saying
The
that
sweet
stress
spot.
is bad. It's important to have a stress response if a bus comes in front of your face so that you jump back and you don't get hit by it, right? So
Right.
stress is important. It's just not important all the time. And having inside introspection and understanding how we can override that stress response and move into the compassionate space. So again, thinking about theoretical models, Paul Gilbert, again, he from and compassion focused therapy talks about how there's three drives to survive. So there's the threat response, which is running away from danger, or also if you've eaten something that is not healthy for you or is poisonous, it will throw it up. So those are also tied to emotions like anger, anxiety, and disgust. So that's one element of like
Hmm.
our life force drives. The other is resources, gathering resources. So getting your blueberries, your firewood, things to survive in competition.
Yeah.
And that is also stress activating, but the emotions and energies tied to that are different. You can have joy, you can have competition, you can have reward, right?
Yes.
And then the last one is soothing. And that is the key, I guess the key for me to all the work that I do is, and that's based off of your attachment. So knowing that it's important to be that you can be safe with someone, or you learn that through like your childbearing and parent to parental relationship, and you can then develop your own attachment with yourself through self-compassion so that you can soothe on your own. But this element to your life is
Hmm.
that we can rest because we need to rest, or else we can't do all the other things that we need to
Hmm.
do. And we need to feel calm and safe
Right.
with other people and part of community. So that's the other element, right? So what's cool is by using your breath, by understanding your emotions, by moving into your body, you can move from the soothing to the threat responses much more willingly or like consciously,
Okay.
right? And by using your breath, you can actually
Right.
turn off the stress response and move into the soothing element by using, soothing touch, by being held,
Hmm.
by, if you like being held by others, sometimes a hug can feel very soothing. Not for everyone. But yeah, so again, like it's harder to explain without having diagrams and images and all that stuff. But just remember that soothing and attunement and attachment are important for your survival, and that you can kind of move into that in with your intent and with practice.
Hmm. That's very interesting. I can definitely see how some people would have, yeah, just, I guess, no awareness of the three different things and what it feels like to be calm. So, your role is like really reinforcing what moments throughout the day did you feel good, rested, calm, not, and then just getting people to notice that and prioritize that must be huge. Like that must be life changing for somebody who's never thought about it.
And it's really scary too. So if someone's experienced trauma, then moving into the soothing aspect is terrifying because it's too vulnerable. They're not ready. So part of the work is also processing that and understanding that like it's okay to be safe sometimes or with some people or in some circumstances, and how to find your way towards some of that safety.
So do you mean like after any sort of trauma, you don't ever want to let your guard down because you're scared that it might happen again?
Letting your guard down moves you into the threat drive. So it's activating physically, biologically, stress, emotionally, all of that. Yeah. So then, so maybe for some,
I understand.
just taking slow breaths or opening up to someone in different, like depending on different types of trauma and stuff like that. But oftentimes the body is one of the first signs. Yeah. Okay. I wasn't even planning on talking about all this stuff. So I feel like we have a lot to cover still.
Well, we'll just have to have you on again if ever we don't cover everything.
I'll just follow you.
Yeah, sounds good. So as an osteo, I always recommend people to get tune-ups. And the reason that we do that is because we want to avoid you ever going into that acute phase because it's debilitating. There's no quality of life when you have that, and pain changes your mood, your sleep, just everything. So I always try to get people to find a schedule that works for them. So I'm curious what the mentality is, or maybe your personal view in psychology. Do you have your own sort of tune-up that you recommend to clients, or as somebody who's listening, who's interested in getting into psychology? I don't know what that could maybe look like for them going forward.
Funny, I was talking to my brother who's does the mental performance coaching and kind of more of the like sports stuff and business stuff. So his is different, he can sort of have an appointment with someone, provide homework, or he can kind of do that, more regular coaching that the person can come with. So it really depends on sort of, for me and my approach is, what do you as the person feel you need? In my approach, the person I'm working with is the expert on their life and on what they need. And just having them choose when they're coming is, I think, an empowering place. I do think that when we come to therapy or to coaching or to the type of healing sessions or I prefer growing sessions, I guess. But when we come to these sessions with less in crisis and more in openness, we can go really deep too. In crisis, we can as well, but we're kind of more maybe problem solving or crisis managing. So maybe the person doesn't have as much of a wide scope on their life. And so we often talk about how you can seek, therapy or the help of a psychologist when you're doing well to do better. And oftentimes those are the type of people that I work really well with, as well as just kind of someone that's wanting to improve their life or wanting to grow. And they're not in a terrible dark space, but they're also feeling like I could make some changes, and talking to someone about what really matters to me without feeling that bias or without having to align with someone that's outside of my life is a really helpful place to be. So yeah, I mean, to answer your question, some of my clients I see monthly, some of them I see every week, some of them I see every 2 weeks, and some of them it changes based off of the life space that they're in. They'll say, I need to see you weekly, or I think you're good. Like, let's, slow down, see each other every month and check in, see where I'm at. And usually towards the end of our work, the sessions become further apart. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. And then do you have like a barometer that you tell them, like, when to come back, or you just kind of hope that everything that you've empowered them with, that they know when they need to maybe reintegrate it when they go through a different transition?
So when I end sessions, I have a specific sort of way to end them, and like a ritual and a way to sort of celebrate the end. And talking about what are some signs that the person might see that would suggest that they need to introspect again, or offer referrals in that sense. So I think like we all have phases of life, and then sometimes it's important for individuals to go off on their own and sort of try and apply the things that we've worked on. And, sometimes I
Hmm.
have clients that, don't come for 6 months, and then they're back and they have new issues, and we build on what we worked on before. And so, again, like, I really think it's about
Okay.
creating the safety that the person knows that they can come back if and when they feel that calling. And sometimes if they've waited too long, for example,
Right.
or they're in crisis in their back, it's also talking about, like, hey, what happened? How did we get here? What can we do for the future so that, this may not happen
Right.
again? And for me, I'm not in the business of creating someone who's dependent on me and that needs me, for everything, but
Hmm.
also I'll be there in different phases of life if hopefully, I mean, I love my job, so I don't imagine not, doing this for a long time, but, witnessing those phases of life with the person if they feel that I'm the right person for them. Yeah.
Okay. Very great answer.
Some people work more like specifically, and they'll have like programs, and they'll have 10 sessions. We'll do this, and each session has a specific plan. I work more like that when I'm doing group therapy and things like that. But when it's really one-on-one work, I like to help have the person turn inwards and make those choices. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. So I was thinking of switching over to talk a little bit
Mm-hmm.
about spirituality. So I just wanted to give the listeners some context on how you and I became friends. So it's actually kind of a funny story. Through a mutual friend, we did this modeling gig together. And in between, it was a full day event, and with a
A
lot of
lot of
time
black
of,
eyeshadow.
just waiting, I
I
guess.
don't know if you remember that. There was a lot of black eyeshadow. Yeah.
Really? I don't remember
The
that.
most I've ever worn.
Anyway, that's funny. And I mean, I'm just assuming that you were the one who approached me since you're more
Probably. I was like,
extroverted.
hello.
But, and then like, and then immediately we started talking about, and I've touched on this already, my obsession with happiness and what it meant. And we talked all about books and life. And I always remember you bringing up the Buddha Brain, which I still have and read. And yeah, and it just always stuck with me, like that concept of biology is belief. And it was probably one of the first times that I was really introduced to it. Um, yeah, so just that was my segue into spirituality. And I was curious, as somebody who has, gone to grad school now, because I just think that I guess spirituality in the wellness world gets a bad rap from, people just view it as, I don't know, crystals and like meditating and being inaccessible and like for a very specific subset of people and non-applicable to everyone else. And just like if you think of like the like alternative spectrum, like very far to the left and very far away from science is like how I think a lot of people view it. And so I was just wondering, as somebody who is, I guess you could say scientist, like you've, studied at the highest and researched at the highest level, how does spirituality coexist for you in
Yeah,
the
well, I
realm of
think I'm really
psychology?
lucky because my field is probably one of the closer fields to spirituality than I would say maybe others. But I think spirituality is,
Hmm.
at the end of the day, this is kind of a funny anecdote. I used to, when I went to prep school, I sang gospel choir, and yeah,
I didn't know
I
that.
was, I just loved it, like the
Cute.
energy and the life behind being in a choir and the type of music we sang. And I would go from like soccer practice in my cleats to gospel choir. That's what I loved about prep schools. You could do that. But we had these multi-faith
Yeah.
services, and I think spirituality for me comes down to faith and sort of how we want to sort of look at life and make meaning of it. And I think some people make meaning through spirituality and through science. And there's a lot that science just hasn't answered yet. And we know through the history of science that sometimes what we think is science and is the answer is really just a step in understanding more truth. So I guess the more that I've studied and the more that
Hmm.
I've done school, the more that I sort of think like I know there's so little that I know. So I look at spirituality from a space of
Felt that way too.
humility, really. And in my
Hmm.
clinical practice, I think spirituality can be a really important strength for the person. So, sometimes I work with people who've had a very strong faith, and that guides them in some of the decisions that they've made, and can also help them find strength in really dark moments. I've also worked with people that spirituality and religion have been hugely painful for them in their lives, and want to break free from the rules that religion has set
Mm.
for them in their life. So for me, spirituality isn't a place of rules. It's a place of knowing and meaning and introspection, and tuning into, I guess, nature and life's force in the way that we can explain things. And I used to like having a system to explain things, but I guess for me, spirituality is a space where I can explore how to explain things. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay. That's yeah, very interesting perspective. And I'm trying to think of like concrete ways, because it's funny, I mentioned meditation, and I think that some people associate that with spirituality, but there's actually
Yeah.
a lot of like
Yeah.
scientific data now supporting it, but not necessarily really fully understanding it. I think we're just on the tip of like understanding how, and I could be getting this wrong, going into those
Beta
alpha
states. Yeah. Totally.
waves,
Yeah.
how they can beta states, yeah, can really like
Yeah.
change the chemistry of your brain. And one book that I really loved was oh God, it's by Emily Fletcher. I've already brought this book up before, but it was anyway by Emily Fletcher. I will look it up again. But basically, she was saying that her goal in life was to get people to do like little meditations throughout the day, so that they could reset their nervous system, and then also tap into like how they're feeling. And I think that's such a useful thing that people don't use enough, where it's like you're in a situation, and like let's say somebody, a very simple for me, asking you, do you want to come on the podcast next week? And the immediate response in your body could feel like more fear, more like a certain like more negative emotions. And then at the suggestion of, or maybe another date on like June 25th. And so, and then that feels warm. It's like being able to make decisions for your life based on like being able to tap into like what you're feeling. And I find that a lot of that is learned through sitting in silence, connecting to your body. Like, I don't want to say eliminating the thoughts, but just like noticing them and
Yeah, for sure.
going
Because
inward.
then you can sort of notice, okay, am I responding to this from a place of fear, or am I responding to this from a place of joy? And then sort of see what it is that's driving you in your decision making, or in the person that you're showing up to your life in. And then, choosing love or fear in a sense, like compassionate love doesn't have to be romantic or whatever, but choosing that allows you maybe to feel more aligned long term with your life and who you are. And so mindfulness meditation doesn't have to be sitting in formal practice. It can also be through like, my brother was giving me an example of a client who does that through chopping wood, and allowing those negative thoughts to flow away when the wood is chopped.
Interesting.
And I don't know if you felt that when you
Whatever
were playing
works.
hockey, or like in any athletic endeavors you've done, but that state of flow, right? Which was really the most powerful state that I felt, I guess, in birth, but also in rowing, and being in that space where you're fully connected to the present moment, to your body, to your experience, and also your mind is like free, and the thoughts that come in are just in and out, and you're just so there. So there's lots of ways to connect to that element of like mindfulness spirituality, that you can sort of, some people do it through mindful walking. I find that so boring. That is not for me, but like hiking is way better. So I think just finding the way that like works for you as a person, and for you, the time of day. You said in the morning, for example, and sometimes that's not the right time for me. So part of the work too is figuring out what speaks to you in that sense. Yeah.
Yes, I love that concept of the flow state, and I couldn't agree more. With being an ex-athlete, ex-athlete, so dramatic, is that's really when I feel my most powerful, and that's really where I feel like after doing it, I really get big boosts in confidence, and it really connects me to that I don't know, some sort of fire, where it's just like you feel confident again. I think a lot of it has to do with like the hormones, but it just brings me back to, because the deepest flow states were really when I was playing sports, hands down. It's like, I find it's hard to recreate it to that extent now, but I really do, I'm able to tap into it. And I was just telling a friend that I find that like walking and, calmer exercises, I just can't quite tap into something. I don't like get that big release like I do when I'm doing something more high intensity. Yeah, and I think it does come from just having the flow state be so present.
I think like you and I
as
can
an
talk about
athlete
this for hours still. Like this is also something we connected with at that passion experience. And just that sense of, what does sport mean to women, and what does it mean after our life as athletes, in high level competitions? Like, how do we integrate sport and movement through our lives as adults and as people who have really busy lives? And one of the things that really changed for me is I read this book. I forget. I think it's like one of the authors is Otto and something, and the book is Exercise for Mood, and understanding that movement can help us actually with our wellness and our mind and our body and our life experience, and using exercise to feel good, not to look a certain way or to perform a certain way. Just for me, exercise was like all about performance, and then moving into a space of like, hey, I'm feeling really stressed out, or I have a lot of things going on in my mind. Preparing for this podcast, I did a dance cardio workout, and then it's true, I was like, okay, I need to ground myself through dance cardio. And then when you asked me to come onto the podcast, I actually was like, oh, I'm in an interesting place in my life where I'm on mat leave, and I'm having such an existential experience, and we can talk about this later if we have time. I don't even know how long we've been talking, okay. Yeah.
41 minutes.
And so I went for a run because you had talked about all these things. And on my run, I thought like, okay, I need to ground all of these ideas in my mind and sort of like, hey, what do I have to say? And am I someone that people want to listen to? And what can I bring in this phase of my life?
Oh my
to
gosh.
the podcast, right? So going for the run helped me structure my mind. And then also helps with your mood after. So, and this is totally not what we're supposed to talk about, but the impact of like the state of flow and exercise, and how that also has a huge role, I guess, in our wellness, you and I, and hopefully other people too listening.
Yeah, I mean, I think no matter where people find it, it must be having that same effect. Like, I think we gravitate towards things that make us feel good.
And in some ways, if like some people do things to feel good to avoid hard emotions and hard places, like a lot of Gabor Mate's work on addictions talks about that. And, but I think that when we're looking at it from a place of empowerment, exercise is one of the best places to sort of go to in a healthy way, in an insightful and intentional way, not so much in a like over performance.
Yeah, for me, it's whenever I feel really like self-doubt, and I guess that's what you were saying too, is like I could do some form of exercise and I won't even have the intention of I'm doing this because I feel so bad about myself, or even starting this podcast, it's like I just hummed and hawed about it for years and years and years. And then I remembered I was doing, it sounds so stupid, but I was doing a spin class with Cody Rigsby on Peloton, and I was just like, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to sit down and just start it tomorrow. Like, why not? And then I did.
There's something
and like
fierce,
there's something
right,
to
that came up for you in that moment of just like, I got this. Like, I can push through the delightful spin class on Peloton. I can do anything.
Yeah. I think it's like it really just breaks through that like thought cycle that you have of being like, why are you going to do this? Nobody cares. Da, da, da. And it's just like,
it gives you a sense of power. Exactly that. And that's for me what birth was too.
Yeah. Okay, I'll ask you one more spiritual question, because it's very on theme for this podcast. Talking kind of about the dangers of some of the messaging that we can kind of get on social media regarding psychology or spirituality, and to give a little rant or context on why I want to talk about this with you specifically is because a few years ago, you and I went to a yoga class where instructor was teaching to a full room, like to the point where people were lining up out into the hallway. So I was like, whew, like, I'm so excited. This is going to be amazing. And we start the class, and he's going on this and this was right when COVID was kind of starting. Clearly we were out of class, so it wasn't quite there yet, but was it February? Anyways, right before. And he just went on this 20-minute rant throwing around, and I was happy to have you there after, so you could kind of label things, where he was throwing around trauma triggering words. Like, none of the sentences really makes sense, but it was like, just throwing around, I guess, a lot of trigger words. And to me, yoga is like supposed to put you into that nice flow state, positive thoughts. And I was just shocked to look around the room, because I kept looking at you, and we were both like, what is happening? What is this guy talking about? And then I looked around, and everyone else was just staring at him like
stars in their eyes,
like as if what he was saying was dogma and true. Yeah. And stars in the eye, like, that's such a good way to put it. Stars in their eyes. And I really felt that for the first time in my life, that concept of a guru, where it's like, when we're vulnerable, just blindly following someone who seems to have some sort of wellness clout. And
how do I go for it?
So yeah, I guess I just see more of this online now. Like, recently I was talking to someone about this person on social media who preaches about how she has to charge, people the rate that she deserves, and and then I'm like seeing what it is. It's like over $300 USD for a one-on-one. And I'm like, where are you even getting that number from? Like, that's above the market rate for a clinical psychologist who has studied at the PhD level and has all these tools and
charge at certain amounts of money for sure online.
And I just struggle with that, because when I think about myself at my most vulnerable, I was like, give me all the self-help books. I'm going to read this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to start meditating. I'm going to, and like, I'll pay. I would have, if I had come across these things when I was very vulnerable, I probably would have paid. And I guess what the problem is that there is such a big scope of tools that you have learned throughout your entire education that may be overlooked. And I remember receiving messaging when I was feeling very vulnerable was that like, oh, if you're not healing, it's because you haven't done the work yet. You haven't done the work. Like, if you're still sad, it's because of this. There was no, I guess, self-compassion. It was like,
blaming.
It's like shaming. There's something inherently flawed about you. You shouldn't have any ailments or anxiousness if you have evolved your soul. And it was just like, I just found that really hard. And I think that it was almost like even doubled down sometimes in osteo school, that messaging. And then I just find like there was really a strong messaging from certain teachers, not everyone, of just being like, if you're not I just felt a bit out of place sometimes as an anxious person, and, not being,
I'm like, I need to.
I won't go into too much detail, but
I'll let you answer what you want.
Yeah.
I like learning about you on this podcast.
Okay. Yeah, well, it was just, it just comes back to that same thing where it was like, I went through a big thing when I was there, and I've really found now in hindsight, I've realized that it's because I was such an introvert, and this school really was tailored to extroverts. Like, you're explaining every day to a supervisor, and I was just not flourishing. And there was always like, they would never, also in French, and they wouldn't give me any feedback like about my osteo. It was always like, what is wrong with you? Like, do you meditate? Like, why aren't you self-compassionate enough? Do you do this? Like, go see someone who can help you to it was just a lot about like my inner flawedness versus the like objective standards. So I think this is why this like subject bothers me so much. And I think it was Brene Brown or somebody who's more of a clinical practitioner who was just saying like, it can be very dangerous to tell someone who's like, let's say in an abusive relationship, that all of these like negative thoughts and recurring cycles is because like you're flawed, and you just need to change your thoughts on the situation and your life will be better, because like this person is in a dangerous situation and they need to they need to go through something very specific and have very specific tools to get out of it.
No.
They can't just like meditate and change their thought patterns, which is like the rhetoric I always see. Anyways, that was a big rant, but I would love your thoughts.
Right? And like this, like, okay, Guruism, toxic positivity, and that, like, just think better, and your life will change. I mean, yes, that's like a part.
Exactly.
Of changing your life is restructuring your mind and sort of seeing things differently. But sometimes, and that's not exactly for like crisis situations or for trauma or things like that right away. But I think to start with your guru situation, for me, I think healing happens or growing happens in lots of different ways. When I was in my training, there's really cool multicultural approaches where we actually include spiritual healers, people from the community in sessions to have the person sort of look at those perspectives in their healing. So I'm much of a holistic perspective, I guess, when it comes to healing and growing. So I don't think that psychologists and medical doctors are the only answers to growth. But I do think that how power is shared between the people who are, I guess, in the healing space or the growing space is really important. So for me, the expert of the person is a person. So even in looking at it from a medical perspective or from an osteo perspective, I think you're very good at this, is listening to the person, saying like, this is where the pain's showing up and how it's showing up for me. And you propose different, healing treatments, and working with them to build together. Now, what happens with gurus a lot of times is that they have the answer. For me, in spirituality and psychology, the answer lies within, and I'm just here to help you find that answer and explore it together, and maybe reframe or just go with you in those dark corners of yourself that are scary to go alone in, and help turn the light on. Not do all of it for you or teach you my ways. Yes, I walk my path, and in doing so, I'm more honest in walking the path with you, but I'm not the answer to everyone. And in fact, like, I think it's really, my partner and I were talking about this in the car yesterday. We have like those are the moments for us that we go deep. But if everyone is being their true self, like, imagine the type of world will be created if we all choose tomorrow to be attuned to our true self and our values, and how much change that creates just in that one choice of aligning to our values and what's meaningful to us, and how much of an impact worldwide that can have. And so the danger with gurus is they say my way is the way,
right?
And then we end up dimming, a lot of people's lives. But sometimes and people who are, attracted to that type of person need that kind of strength in their life at the time. So I would say if you're worried, like, oh, am I working with a guru, or is this person well trained, or look at their training, look at their life experience, and see, is this person someone that I resonate with, first of all, and second of all, are my traumas resonating with this person? Is this a trauma bond, or is this a bond in which I feel free and sovereign, and that I can that I am empowered in?
I like that. And I also just want to say that I am, like, similar to how you answered that question. I love the spiritual realm, and I remember going to like I'm going to say spiritual guide without going into too many details, but when I went, it was very much about like how I can help my soul evolve. And I remember the takeaways where it was nothing scary, nothing forceful, but it talked about how I was as a person, and like we talked about how I could be a better healer. It wasn't like you need to go and change who you are. It was like, you are this way because you're going to reach certain people that you could never, that wouldn't be able to be reached by another person. You're going to be able to, I just felt so empowered leaving there, and more, I guess, like we were talking about, more self-compassion, more understanding of myself, feeling better and safer in who I am. Whereas like I was saying, like some of the messaging online that I see is like, you need to change and you're not perfect and you only be perfect if you do it my way. And I think, like you said, that's a very good way to kind of differentiate it is looking into credentials, how you feel after their approach is definitely multidimensional. And I'm just throwing it out there that I do really enjoy a lot of aspects of
I know
that world
you,
also. But
yeah, you and I
just
like
being mindful
definitely
on how you
connect, I
feel
think, on that
after.
like spiritual level and our spirit, and like to grow in that direction together and talk about that a lot. I think, I remember when you were doing your osteo school and how tough it was, and I'm like so feeling so protective of you and those teachers that are sort of like saying it that there's something wrong with you because you're quiet and introspective and like observant. And I think that's one of the things that also makes people feel so safe with you too, is just, you are comfortable in silence and gentle in so many ways, and approachable. And those are some of your like best strengths, I think, as a healer. So feeling a bit frustrated about that without having to go too far into it, but thinking about how hard that must have been for you. And I haven't read the book, but Quiet, about introversion, I think you've read it before, and how.
Oh, this was the podcast I just listened to with, the author was just on Dax
Mhm.
Shepard, and I recommend it to any
I
introverts.
feel
Ryan
so
and I were
seen.
listening to it being like, oh
Yeah,
my God, like
yeah,
we're mind blown.
yeah,
So seen. Like it made me realize like I wanted to like
yeah.
write a letter to my osteo school after listening to it. That's
Hmm.
how
It's
like
tough.
much
Like
how
sometimes when
hurt
we
I
don't feel like
felt.
we fit in with a career that we
Yeah.
love. I felt that way in my doctorate too, that I was a bit different, and in some ways, and that I just a lot of my schooling was more of a psychodynamic approach, and I I was not really into that at the time, and I still love like the idea that
Yeah.
attachment has a big impact on our past, has impact on our present. But yeah, so feeling different sometimes is hard, but also it sounds like what
Hmm.
you brought to your training was, very important in being different. And by being ourselves, like we're able to make that impact or splash or ripple effect onto the world. And that's what I worry sometimes with the social media programs, is that we're stepping away from our intuition and our true self to follow this plan, because it makes our anxiety feel at peace because we have a plan. But it's not necessarily the most
Right.
like intuitive or aligned path, I guess, with who we are. And anyway, this comes up a lot with parenting with my partner and I,
Hmm.
is this idea of coming back to our intuition and not
Okay.
parenting with the internet, but parenting with our true selves and each other. um, yeah.
I love that. I'm not even a parent, but I follow so many parenting things because it fits with like my clientele. And I'm like no wonder it's just, I find parents seem to be having such a harder time because there's so many shame messages like, do this, do this, do this. And I've recently talked to my mom about that. It's like what I feel is the biggest difference between the parenting now and when my mom did it is you weren't bombarded with
Yeah.
messages pointing out your failures constantly,
Hmm.
or
Or just
wasn't
it's
as much
just the inner life
comparison.
wasn't
And
as available. On
exactly,
social
they
media, we
just,
see everyone's like chosen inner life, but it seems as if it's their inner
yes,
life. And coming back to the social media piece, like
yes,
when following, experts in psychology, again, like how do you feel when you're watching their page? Are you inspired? Are you motivated? Are you leaving feeling guilty and ashamed? That's a good indicator of,
yes.
maybe working with them or watching their work
Hmm.
isn't as helpful as you thought it might be. And Paul Gilbert often asks, is it helpful or harmful?
Right.
Um, Quick question to answer in your mind. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. I like that. So since you've segued a
I
bit into
know.
motherhood, I know we're
We can talk
running out
more
of
about
time
it
now, but
another
I will
time if
ask
you
you a
want.
few questions. um, okay, let me see what I would like to ask. It could kind of be like our last thing to wrap it up, but I do want to touch on it because
I
it is
wrote
so
some notes,
fresh in
so
your
I can
mind
always come
now.
back to them another
Um,
time.
okay, perfect. Okay, so maybe I'll just get like, do you have any, because a lot of my listeners and clientele are new moms. So would you have any advice from a mental health
Hmm.
perspective for new moms or expecting moms?
Yeah.
And I know we've
Oh
touched on
my
a few
gosh, like
things, but
again, I had to write notes because I feel like I could talk a lot about this, and I guess I'm not from a place of giving advice, but like, oh, you're not alone. It might feel lonely sometimes, but becoming a
mm,
parent is also becoming part of a really beautiful community of people who, I guess, in my approach of parenting, I'm trying to create a space where my child can become his true self and grow and explore in a place that's safe, with someone who's curious and open, which is also really hard because then it's also taking a hard look at yourself and sort of who you are as a parent and who you want to be as a parent and what were you like as a child and what did parenting mean to you. So if I have to give advice, I guess really introspect is get to know yourself. If you're expecting and your child isn't here, my partner and I, we used a lot of that time to, I guess I felt a lot of pressure from like social media and society, and even some of my friends who are like, I was born to be a mom, and they're like talking to their belly all day. Like that was not me. It was more like, who am I now? Who do I want to be as a parent? What are some of the things that I find difficult in becoming a parent? What are some of my fears? How can I overcome those fears? And we didn't spend like hours and hours talking about this, but really spending the time to to know myself, before this, child arrived into my life. And surprisingly enough, becoming mother, I've never felt so much myself. When I was so worried I would lose myself, feel so much more myself.
Mm,
Yes, which was like a huge surprise. That was one of your
interesting.
questions, like what did surprise yourself is how me I am. And it's
Mm-hmm.
because I now have to make decisions based off of my values, based off of what's really meaningful for me. And in moments that I may be feeling emotionally flooded or touched out, I still have to make those decisions. And so I can't hide from me anymore in the type of parenting that I want to do. So yeah, my
Mm.
advice would be to like, get to know yourself and get to know your partner and what might be difficult for you. And if you're, for me, it's like, for example, when my son's crying, I want, like, there's a part of me that's like crying with him and feels so attuned to him and so like, oh, and reminding myself that I'm the
Mm-hmm.
adult. My inner child might be feeling with him, but I'm the adult, and to co-regulate to help him feel at peace and calm. So those are really like tough things to do when you're really tired, or experiencing, the difficulties of daily life. So yeah, tuning in and introspecting, getting to know yourself is really important. And I want to see what else I wrote down. Oh yeah, your hormones are real, and they are there to help you, but they don't have to be everything. So, like for me, I still am like, is he sleeping? Is he waking up? And then I'm like always kind of on heightened response, but knowing that it's there to help like my baby survive
Mm-hmm.
and that, my baby is safe, and reminding myself those things and having my partner sort of tell me like, hey, this is okay and it's normal, and helping him
Mm-hmm.
remind me that we're trying to face the challenges together with our inner spirit and our inner higher self, and not like with all of the bombarding internet and even other people around us, parents, friends, other people who parent a different way. You can already bring yourself to the space of like, oh, am I doing this right, or how can I do this better? And then coming back to ourselves and sort of saying, okay, this is what's important to us, these are why we made these decisions, this is what we hope to offer our child, and ground ourselves in those pillars. Yeah, am I making sense? I'm trying to.
You're making so much sense, but I just find that for me, it's just highlighting the importance of, if you've never done any sort
Yeah,
of like introspection therapy, or because it sounds like, you had the tools to be able to like go deep and have a foundation to work around. And what I think about a lot is like so many things you just mentioned, like I had never even thought of, and I'm
yeah.
pretty
You're
like
pretty deep.
I'm in the therapy world. So I just think about a lot of moms. I think about a lot of moms, and I don't know, I just really hope that they hear that, and I hope it encourages a lot of people to just having that person, whether it's a psychologist or whoever it may be, to yeah, to reassure you and help like melt the shame while you're going through
Yeah,
everything. And
like
yeah,
I was talking to my friend, and she's like on the verge of giving birth,
yeah.
and she's reading all these things, and she's getting so much advice from everyone. And even when I was about to give birth, everyone was like, oh, sleep now while you can, and that just
Hmm.
made me more stressed. And I was having like some insomnia. I couldn't sleep from 4 to 7 most nights, and that's when I was like reading about birth, um and I was even finding myself telling her like, oh, make sure you rest
Yeah.
up. No, make sure that you do things that bring you joy, true joy. so that you know yourself, and that when you're in
Mm-hmm.
situations where you have so much less time for yourself, you are able to access that joy and to remember what those coping
Mm-hmm.
strategies that you had, so that you can still feel, I guess, you in those moments. And like, what was wild about becoming a mother is the range of
Mm-hmm.
emotions and how heightened they are. Is like from everything. You know, it's like, and they can switch very fast. um, so from an existential perspective, it's like
Mm-hmm.
everything's different yet everything's the same, and so simple and yet so complex. So yeah, for sure. Like if you have someone that you really trust, or a trusted parent, friend, someone in your community, your spiritual community, you don't necessarily need to talk to someone like me to go through this and figure out what it means for you to become a parent. Is like really thinking about that meaning, and why am I a parent, and what do I want to bring to parenting. But if you don't, sometimes a psychologist is a good place to start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember somebody threw a stat at me the other day that it actually takes four people
I'm not
to raise
surprised.
one child. Like, it always
Yeah.
comes back to that saying, like, it takes a village. And yeah, we live in a very individualistic society. So I really hope that one of the takeaways here is like just the importance of community and having someone to go through it with you and talk about all that big range of emotions
Yeah.
that you're
And
feeling
like
that are
that just
heightened
reminds
by
me too,
hormones.
when we gave birth, like we decided to do a slow postpartum, which is based a lot more in like um not so much in the individualistic, but more like uh I don't have the right word, but more like community based systems, you know, and in different levels of the world. But
Hmm.
taking the time to let your body heal, going to see someone like you or pelvic floor, specialist, to help the woman's body heal is so important to healing. So not only at a physical, spiritual, emotional, mental level, but like really looking at it in terms of like your healing as a person, because we think about birth so much, we don't necessarily think so much about postpartum. And like that postpartum period, when I was
Hmm.
so tender, when most people are so tender, your body needs so much care. But I mean, my body was also carrying, like, uh, caring for a child, and like feeding this child, and trying to figure out how to sleep now. And so anyway, the importance of your community is not just necessarily who you love that is around you, but also who's the healing professional that can help support you, so that you can actually heal your body, and then for long-term health, not just for today health, so that you can bend and pick up your child, so that you can run without having to worry about like peeing your pants, like there's, so that you can move your core in a way that's safe for the rest of your life. And so I think that like your work is so important for parenting as well, and from a physical element. And I mean, I always love how our work collides so beautifully together. Mm-mm.
Yeah, just everything you just said. One of the first person that I ever interviewed was Marie-Josée, and she's a pelvic floor physiotherapist, and just stuck with me as she was
Yeah.
like, there's so much pressure to bounce back quick. And she's like, no, she's like, literally all of your
Mm-hmm.
joints have been
Mm-hmm.
stretched out. If we're just talking about the physical, but then you add all the different layers, the transformation. I think one of the big reasons why birth is is not easy is because it's supposed to represent, this giant transformation. And I really love that idea of a slow postpartum. And
Yeah.
I definitely want to have you on again to talk about it. But yeah, it really is. Not that I've gone through it, but from all the conversations I've had in my clinic, is I just wish
I know
that
we're trying to wrap up,
more
so if I
people
say
had
two things
had
really
that.
quickly. One of the things that helped me as like a high performer, like sort of,
Go
person
for
that
it.
likes to do things well, and that I'm trying to heal from, um, is that I heard a podcast episode, and the woman was talking about how she works with, she's a physio, and she works with women who are pro athletes and motherhood, and then going back to pro sports after, and how important the like a postpartum period is, and not
Hmm.
exercising and relaxing and healing and slowing down, and how that actually boomerangs you forward
Mm,
into a much better, healthier physical space. So for me, that was so important. In fact, like
yes.
I think I almost took 5 months off from like really hard movement, and my son's around 8 months now, and I've just started to like do more high intensity exercising than before. So, which is like really weird for me, and for a lot of, I think, others as well. And then we're talking about the spiritual realm of like therapy, psychology, and then motherhood. The most incredible part of birthing, which is something that I don't know if everyone talks about, is the physical strength that it takes. And I mean, I, I guess I'm lucky, but also I guess I like put things in place to be able to have a natural birth. By natural, I mean not medicated, because I think every birth is natural, but that's, I guess, the term most people use. Um, but having an unmedicated birth, I was, able to be conscious of having my body be in the physical realm, but also my spirit, welcoming in my child. And for me, that's also, birth is a beautiful space where we, again, bridge between the physical and the metaphysical, and feeling like, you have one foot in life and one foot in the in between, and being the conduit for that. So, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's, again, when
So
we look at life
interesting.
from a holistic perspective, like we can find a lot of meaning and understand and sort of see how we understand things. And that's why I'm so pleased to be on your podcast and to know you as, a really amazing friend, because we are able to have these conversations and like bridge the gap between our work that is so similar and so aligned. So thank you so much. Yeah,
My gosh, thank you. I feel
me
like
too.
I feel like I already love you so much, but just after this and hearing you in like I always say this with Ryan, like with Ryan too. One time I worked with him in collaboration a little bit, and seeing him at work was like, oh my gosh, like I was so impressed by him, and I feel that way with you right now. It's like this whole dimension of you that I didn't know, and I feel so grateful that I just got like a little snippet of it, and just like, I was always so
Same way
impressed
for
by you,
me.
but
Like, I
now
guess
it's
I'm
just
lucky
like
because I
even
was able
more.
to have you as my osteo and to treat like Lexon when he was born. And so I've seen you in your work, but like whenever you just get into this, I feel you are in the flow, I mean, I'm distracting you because I'm asking you all these questions about life and we're catching up. But like, if I were to be quiet, I think I'm witnessing your flow more. I mean, I think I could see that you bring that element to your work. And I mean, I'm sure all your listeners like will wish to come see you, but if you haven't seen Riley, it will bring you a very beautiful experience to your physical and emotional being.
Well, I wish we
I know
weren't
I
so
can't.
close so
We
you
were
could be
friends.
my psychologist.
I
You
can
need to
refer you.
find me
I've got
someone
lots
just
of good
like you, okay?
referrals in my community. So if ever you want some, or if any of your listeners want some, you guys can definitely reach out, and I
Okay, great.
can help connect you with. Because sometimes I think that's a big barrier, even for me, is like, who do I work with, and who do
Perfect.
I trust with my innermost being. And
Hmm.
it's a huge honor, I think, for me to be able
Absolutely.
to sit in front of individuals who are, at in a very vulnerable place. And I hope, and I think I will, but I aim to always be humbled by that, and to remember how lucky I am to do this. Hmm.
So if somebody
Um,
wants to work with you, do you
yeah,
take
right
on any
now
new
I'm
clients, and how
closed
can they reach
until
you?
fall. So I'm still on mat leave. Yeah, and yeah, I have this very small private
Oh, right.
practice, and I also work full time in a university. So if someone would want to work with me, it would be just to email me at my work email. And if I can't work with you, I'll do my best to find you the person that you can work with. So if you need that kind of support, then feel free to reach out. I'm definitely open to help match you with someone that I know as much as I can.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Paul Gilbert a
Okay,
lot.
so
Was
Paul Gilbert and
is that
Kristen
a
Neff.
book
Paul Gilbert, he does
that he wrote,
compassion
or?
focused therapy. Kristen Neff, she's like the main researcher on self compassion. She has an amazing website that has she gathers all the research on self
Okay.
compassion, and it's there. There's exercises. There's a ton. She wrote like so many books. Her most recent book's on fierce self compassion. So I think a lot of times we think self compassion is just being like nice and super flowery. Self compassion is also setting boundaries and being, fiercely yourself,
Hmm.
and making space in your life to be kind to yourself. So that's a really nice, I guess, book that you can read from her. And what's cool is they're both alive, so you can actually train with them if
Okay.
you're interested. And Paul Gilbert, she's out of the US. Paul
Perfect.
Gilbert's out of the UK. And he also has a website with trainings that you can buy. He's written a few books. Yeah, I can.
Okay.
My two favorites would be, it's not written by him, but for Kristen Neff, there's a self compassion workbook, And there's a compassion-focused therapy workbook as well. And I can send you some books referrals if you want, Riley. I can email them too if you want to post them. Yeah.
Perfect.
So thanks so much for having me.
That'd be great. Well, thank you. Oh my gosh. No, thank you so much for making time to talk to me.
To come back or just talk in person.
Oh no, I'm definitely having you back. But thank you so much for coming today, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you. Bye.